Welcome to the Church of Now podcast, where we believe kids and students and young adults can make a difference now in the moment. We don't just ask them to be the future of the church, but we believe that they are the church of now. We're going to be talking with ministry leaders about what it looks like to inspire and tell young adults and kids and students what it looks like to make a difference now in the church. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, welcome to the podcast. We have Daniel Overdorf. He is a professor at Johnson University, does a lot of preaching and teaching and Bible stuff there. And I had the pleasure of having Dr. Overdorf for a couple of years, and excited to have him on the podcast. I know he believes in students, definitely college students, and he has kids of his own that are in middle high school area there. Mm-hmm. So you know what it's like to be with kids, be with young people. And I know that you believe in the Church of Now. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in West Virginia, so I'm a Appalachian Mountain boy, and fortunately had a healthy family, and I was blessed in a lot of ways, being able to grow up where I grew up and with the people that I grew up with, and in college, or here rather, in college, and then. After that, after graduating college, I spent the next 10 years in church ministry. I was with a church in Illinois for about 3.5 years, and then a church in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta, for 7 years. And then during that time, I was doing graduate work on the side also. So I got a master's degree and a doctorate of ministry. And then, after 10 years of that, made the transition to teaching here at Johnson. Yeah.
Cool. What kind of led you to teaching? I mean, you were in the ministry for a while, so why did you choose to go in and kind of teach?
That's a great question. It was a really hard decision for us, for my wife and I, because we love the church, and we love ministry, and we loved the church where we were in Georgia. They treated us great. It was a healthy situation. They loved my family. It wasn't a matter of running from the church or running from the ministry. Loved it, loved where we were. And I didn't have any plans to teach. I didn't really make that, even when I did my graduate work, it was not to be a professor. I just wanted to be the best minister I could be. Yeah. So, but then when the opportunity came up, and it took us a long time to decide, I mean, honestly, like a couple of years. Wow. From when there first began to be an opportunity and till we finally pulled the trigger. But the reason we made the decision was it just gave us more of an opportunity to multiply ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to a man named Wayne Shaw, a man who was one of my professors and mentors from years ago, who loved preaching and loved the church, but went the academic route. And I said, Wayne, why did you choose that? Why are you a professor rather than a week in, week out preacher at a church? And he said, I back on my teaching career, and there are students who came through my classroom who were on every continent preaching the gospel. And I don't know if we had Antarctica, every inhabitant continent. And I've just been at this 15 years, but already that's the case. There have been students who have come through my classroom that have gone to every inhabited continent around the world. And so that's exciting for me, and that's really the reason that we made the call. And 15 years later, still glad we're here, and feel like we're following the right direction, and following, I guess, what I would call the next evolution of God's mission and purpose for my life. My heart is in the church, and my heart is in preaching and ministry and Christian leadership. And my first 10 years, that looked one way in the local church. And now for the last 15, it's been through this ministry at the university. Right. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Is Johnson the only place that you've taught at?
Only place I've taught full time. Okay. I've done a little bit of online or adjunct or intensive week classes elsewhere, but yeah, this is the only place I've been full time.
Cool. I wasn't sure if there was anywhere else before or whatever. So you came from ministry to Johnson then?
Yeah, I came straight out of the church to here.
Well, cool. So you obviously work with students, you work with, 18 to 22-year-olds mostly. I know that there's some that come that aren't in that age.
Sure.
A lot of people look at millennial and Gen Z and say they're lazy people. They don't want to do anything. They don't have a direction in life. And I know that you probably have some pushback on that. What do you want people to know about the students that you work with?
Mm-hmm. As with any generation, there probably are there are few lazy ones mixed in,
Right, of course,
as there are with every generation. But
right.
I tell you, yeah. But man, on the whole, and this is the reason I'm here,
Right.
is I really believe this generation has the potential to turn the world upside down for Jesus, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that.
Right.
I see in this generation a deep desire to make a difference, and a willingness to sacrifice to make a difference. Not satisfied with just status quo, not satisfied with just existing, but really wanting to see God's kingdom advance.
Right.
And not satisfied with anything less than that. And so I see that drive. I see that passion to make a difference. And then honestly, also too, I see in this generation an ability to engage with the culture in a way that maybe my own generation wasn't as good at.
Right.
Just an ability to communicate, to understand, to relate. It's a generation, of course, very much shaped by technology and media, and the students we have here, the students who are sold out for God, are able to use that and engage the culture with that.
Right.
So yeah, I think this generation is going to make a huge difference for the kingdom. I deeply believe that. I
agree, and I definitely think the culture thing is a big thing, right? Them knowing the culture, they understand things like TikTok and YouTube and things like that, and they're able to use that. If they use it for the right way, then that's good,
Yeah.
And I think that those, especially your students at Johnson, they want to use any avenue they can to tell people about who Jesus is.
Yeah. And many of them are thinking so creatively about what that can look like, and ways to use technology to get into closed countries and getting into locations that otherwise we wouldn't be able to have a voice.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you were, in the shoes of your students before, right? And you were in kids and youth ministry at some point in your life. Do you feel like, and I believe your dad was the pastor at your church, or if not, maybe later down the road. Did you have opportunities when you were a kid to be like the church of now? Did you have opportunities to preach and teach and lead and do all those kind of things? If so, what did it look like? If not, what would you like to have seen when you were younger?
Yeah, man, I tell you, I was so blessed in this area, and that I was at a church, my home church in West Virginia. I was at a church and had student ministers who very much encouraged us and encouraged me to be involved and to be a part of the church of now. I look back even in middle school, and how our student ministers and our other leaders would they would allow leadership from among the students. And I remember even in middle school being able to be a part of that, of planning and thinking about and brainstorming and helping to shape what our student ministry would be like.
Right.
And then I remember even I even having the opportunity to preach when I was in middle school. There was I forget my first sermon, but there was like an area men's gathering kind of thing, and they asked for 2 or 3 of the youth from our church to preach for this thing. And honestly, I think I was in like 7th grade, maybe 8th grade. And I got to preach,
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
and I preached on Abraham, and it was I preached on his whole life, not like just one text. I was like Abraham, and the whole sermon took 7 minutes.
Yep, that's exactly how mine was too.
I know. This is Yeah, said everything that could be said about Abraham. I mean, I look back on that, and man, that was so valuable
Yeah.
in my own development. And then when people would would encourage me afterwards and say, man, God's given you a gift there. You need to hone that. You need to pursue that. But again, for me, I was just so blessed to be in a place where they encourage that. And for that reason, there are a ton of people came out of that church who were serving, on the mission field in ministry, and maybe with secular jobs, but in leadership in their churches. And
right.
So for me, I had a good model of that, I think.
That's great. That's great. And, when we tell people that they have a place and a purpose, you kind of see the effects of that.
Oh,
right?
Man, it's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
I love that. Love that your church was willing to do that. And there's a lot of great churches out there that do that, which is awesome.
Yeah. It was a blessing for me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. When I say we are all the church of now, it doesn't just have to be students or young adults. It can be all. We have 5 generations in the church right now. When I say we're all the church of now, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'd say in my mind goes first to the family image, which is so strong in Scripture. The brothers and sisters, and the honoring the elderly among you, and the family image that's so strong in Paul's writings. Jesus talked about it. And when you're part of a family, you're part of the family, and you don't say to a kid, well, when you grow up, you're going to be part of the family.
Right.
You're part of the family now, and a functioning part. And so I even, to mix my metaphors here now, you got the family image. Paul also gives that the image of the church as the body, and Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, and every person has that part to play, and that includes the 5-year-old and the 15-year-old, and the 25-year-old, and the 85-year-old. That they're all a part of the family, all a part of the body, all a part of the church of now. And it is, and I, you can think about almost both ends of the spectrum. Some churches take their youth and kind of put them over in a corner and say, you got to wait. Some churches also do that with older folks, people who are in the later years of their life. You had your time, go over and sit in the corner now. But I don't think either of those are biblical or healthy. It's not what God calls the church to be.
For sure.
Yeah.
Every generation, and so many times our focus is, or people always say that we're the church of the future, right? The younger people,
right?
But so many times we can treat some of the older generations as the church of the past. And they can fall into that idea. But the truth is they have a purpose too.
Absolutely.
Whether that's encouraging or doing whatever, they have a place and a purpose. Retirement, but they have a lot of wisdom to give.
Yeah. Well, and then I love when some churches do really well in building relationships between the older generation and middle school, high school students, college age students, and those things are really cool to see.
For sure.
The way that both serve and encourage each other.
I love to see that, for sure.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have listeners on the podcast that are in middle school and high school. We'll have them in the older generations too. But for somebody that's listening, it's probably a youth student or a young adult that's been told multiple times, hey, you're the church of the future. What would you have to say to that listener?
Yeah. Well, for somebody who's been told that, the first thing I would say is that I'm sorry. I hate that you were told that, because you are a part of the church of now. You are a part of the family, part of the body, that you have value, as much as anybody else has value in the church, that you're cherished, you're created in the image of God, redeemed through the blood of Christ. You have great value, and that you also have important function, that God has given you ways to serve and ways to encourage and ways to build other people up. And I would encourage them to find the best avenues that they can find to use those gifts that they have. And it's unfortunate that some churches don't allow that.
Right.
But I think as church leaders and older church members see the young loving and serving and encouraging, that some of those walls will come down.
Yeah.
So I think first thing I would say is I'm sorry to the person who's been told that. But then I would say, Paul to Timothy set an example. You show what godliness looks like.
For sure.
In your life, the way that you love, the way that you talk, the way that you serve people.
Yep.
Just show what a follower of Christ can be.
Yeah, especially at a young age, that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so many times we see if kids come to church, usually their parents follow. Or if none of their family went to church, and it just kind of shows that example that if you set the example, then the older generations kind of follow too, which is kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, it is. But you do see that happen. That's that childlike faith. Jesus certainly had a lot of good things to say about it.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So how can we help every single generation in the church understand that they are the church right now in the moment?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think of two or three things. One, I think about everybody being able to have a voice, to be able to speak into what the church can be, what the church should be. That kind of the image I used a minute ago, that we don't tell anybody. You just have to go over and sit in the corner.
Right.
But that people are free and feel free to have a voice in what a community can be and a church can be. And then I just think also about ways to engage, ways to be involved. And, even reflecting back again on my own experience when, get that middle schooler up there on stage, even not just in the youth service, and in the adults, get them up there. At the church I attend here in Knoxville on Father's Day, worship was led by the father and his daughter, who's awesome. 8th grade, 9th grade or something. And it was cool. Usually there's a big blowout band, all of that. It was just him and his guitar and the two voices. And it was the coolest thing.
That's awesome.
And I just think in her development, just for a church of 500 to say, let us hear your voice in worship. Help lead us this morning to the throne of God. And so letting them engage. I love the approach of ministry where you have different ages serving together. Yep. Where not everything is just this Sunday school class of this age goes and does this, or this middle school group goes and does this, but hey, let's bring our whole families, let's bring all generations together and go serve together. So so opportunity, having a voice and opportunities to engage, to be involved. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I got to ask this question. What is your best or your funniest ministry story that you've had over the years?
I tell you one that comes to mind, and this one isn't a funny one.
Okay.
But it kind of comes in the vein of encouraging the next generation.
Yeah.
I remember this is when I was 25, so I was out of college, but still young adult. I had at this point I had been an associate minister with a church in Illinois for like 3 or 4 years, and then we moved to Georgia, so I became a lead minister at age 25. I don't know what in the world they were thinking, but they did, and the church encouraged me in so many ways. But I remember one morning I was at my office in the church building. And I was working on my sermon, typing something out on a computer or something. And this man, one of our elders, just kind of pops his head in my office. His name was Ed Gephardt. And Ed was one of the elders in the church. He was one of the people who had been involved in hiring me. And just an encourager from day one. He had kids my age. And so they just immediately welcomed Carrie and me into their family. We'd spend holidays with them. They would they'll just always be on the lookout for us, encouraging us, and just a great family. But Ed pokes his head in my office and he says, "Hey, I need to borrow your truck." I drove a little pickup truck then, and said, "Hey, I need to borrow your truck." And didn't say why. I didn't ask why. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is it. I trust him. So I tossed my keys to him, and he left, and went back to my sermon or whatever. A couple hours later, he comes back and just tosses me the keys back and says, "Thanks." Sure. You got your own truck, but whatever you need, whatever you need mine for. I finished typing out that sermon or whatever. Went out I was getting ready to leave for lunch, and so went out to the parking lot and got in my truck, and there was a stack of papers sitting there on the passenger seat, and I glanced at them, and they were like the receipt and warranty papers for a new set of tires.
Oh, wow.
And I so I get out of the car and look, and lo and behold, he had borrowed my truck to go get new tires.
Oh, wow.
And he put a note there on the receipt. He just said, no need to ever tell anybody about this. And I didn't for 10 years or so, but
now you do.
Now I do. It's
now
like, what? Yeah. But I just that kind of story needs told.
Oh yeah.
That hey, young minister, I was they paid me fair, but I was a young minister, and
right.
I was in grad school at the time with those bills, and
I get that.
I tried to ignore my yeah, you do. I tried to ignore the balding tires on my truck, but he had noticed.
Yeah.
And just a way to say to a young leader, yeah, we love you, we care for you, we're going to take care of you, you matter. Those kinds of things, they speak volumes.
Yeah.
And so, and that's the kind of thing young leaders need to hear and need to know.
Yeah. I love that story, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You don't always hear those stories, but it's always
I know. And I'd say I said, even my growing up church, I was blessed in the churches where I served.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them, I started one when I was 22 and the other when I was 25. And I never had that feeling of, Daniel, just go sit in the corner while we do church.
Right.
From day one, in both churches, they gave me a voice, and they valued me and valued my opinions and let me learn and grow and make mistakes, and loved me through it all.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I got one more question. And I've learned in your classes, you always need to have some kind of application or something to end the time, right? Well, what's one thing that you want to say to our listeners, or one kind of charge you want to give them as it pertains to everything we've kind of talked about today?
Sure. Well, I would say valuing each member of the family. And I would say that to the 15-year-old, and I would say that to the 75-year-old, and the 50-year-old or 48-year-old like me. Let's value each other, and let's value each other's input. Let's hear each other's voices. Let's offer up each other opportunities to engage and be involved and lead. I think we're at such a divided time in our country over the last couple of years, especially. And it's easy, even in the church, to shut people out if they're not just like us.
Yes.
But that's not what we do in the church. That's not what we do in the family of God. We listen. We're quick to listen. We're slow to speak. We're slow to become angry. And we cherish. We value our brothers and our sisters, whatever generation. Yeah.
Well, sweet. I love that. And thank you for taking time to be on the podcast and your wisdom there. I'm excited. I feel like this podcast has a lot of different voices. We got student ministers, we got professors, we've got people that travel the country and speak. We've had Taylor Brown on the podcast a little bit, which is super awesome. And
yeah, he's great.
Super excited about the whole thing, but very excited to have you on. Somebody, you've impacted my life in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Yeah.
And just grateful to have you on the podcast.
Yep, I'm honored. I appreciate the opportunity.